Hi, I'm Peter Boland, and welcome to our study of the Dao De Jing, here in the Stephen Mitchell translation from Harper Collins. You know, the Dao De Jing is available in literally hundreds of different English translations, not to mention all the other translations in the other languages of the world. Why has this book captured the hearts and minds of so many billions of people throughout human history for thousands of years? Well, let's discover some answers to that question in our work right here. So the Dao De Jing was allegedly written by a Chinese philosopher that we know as Lao Tzu, which means literally old boy or old master. And scholars debate on when he lived. Was it 600 BCE? Was it 300 BCE? Was he even a real guy? Or is it a kind of appellation stuck onto this collection of aphorisms that may have been gathered over a few centuries? We just don't know. And that's not really the aim of this video. What I want to do is approach the Dao De Jing as one of the greatest wisdom texts on the planet. Daoism, like Confucianism, is one of the two main indigenous wisdom traditions of China that have become, in effect, world religions and had enormous impact on all aspects, not only of Asian culture and civilization, but even on things like East Asian Buddhism, Chan Buddhism, and Zen Buddhism, art, architecture, cuisine, landscape design, calligraphy. I mean, you name it. So what does the Dao De Jing have to do with you? Well, let's find out. This whole tradition centers around the idea of Dao, spelled in the Pinyin translation D-A-O, but in the still more common Wade Giles translations as T-A-O, Tao Te Ching. But the Dao De Jing is the book that we know as the centerpiece of Taoist thought. And rather than have me sort of explain what all the different terms mean, let's let the text do the talking. I just want to jump in and read, I don't know, over half of these chapters. Now, by chapter, I simply mean a single poem. And there are 81 of them all together. And we're going to look at a whole bunch of them. So let's get started. So here's chapter 1, this very famous opening line, right? The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. Let me pause right there before I even read the rest. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. There you get the message in the opening line. Lao Tzu is saying, look, we're going to say a lot of things about this thing called the Tao. Please remember that all the concepts that begin to form of the Tao in your mind are not the Tao. So a core message immediately imparted that there is the interior world of concepts, and that then there is the real world to which those concepts refer. And as Taoists will argue, and later Zen Buddhists too, who are so influenced by this book, that we live in a bit of a conceptual prison, and part of Buddhist awakening is to come out of that conceptual prison and see and be with things as they really are. So Tao is ineffable. It cannot be thought and it cannot be spoken. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. Second part, the unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all the particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Yet, mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. This source is called darkness. Darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. That's chapter 1. Quite the send-off. And did you feel that sort of Buddhist wind that just blew through the room? That couplet, free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. So if you want to experience the Tao, or oneness, or ultimate reality, Brahman, God, Holy Spirit, if you want to experience it, you have to let go of cravings and of desires. And as the Christian mystics call it, enter the consciousness of poverty, or as the Buddhists call it, shunyata, emptiness. Become empty. Let go of all grasping and clinging, and realize the great Buddhist idea. Not only is there nothing to grasp, there is, in the final analysis, no one to do the grasping. Coming into that kind of freedom from desire, one realizes the mystery. But if you're still in that, to use the Sanskrit term, rajasic consciousness, ego, ambition, craving, you're not going to ever apprehend or experience Tao. You're just going to see the manifestations. So that's chapter 1. Quite a start, huh? Here's chapter 2. When people see some things as beautiful, other things become ugly. When people see some things as good, other things become bad. Being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy support each other. Long and short define each other. High and low depend on each other. Before and after follow each other. Therefore, the master acts without doing anything and teaches without saying anything. Things arise and she lets them come. Things disappear and she lets them go. She has but doesn't possess. Acts but doesn't expect. When her work is done, she forgets it. That is why it lasts forever. That's a common format in many of the chapters of the Dao De Jing. The first part is like, the Tao is this and the Tao is that. And then at the end it's, and therefore the sage does X, Y, and Z. Then, first the metaphysics, then the ethics. Here's what's going on in reality. Therefore, here's how you might adapt your path to what is happening, or in a word, the Tao. It reminds me of something Gandhi said that I was thinking about this morning. And he's not even much of a theist. He's certainly not a Christian, right? But he put it this way. He said, it is for us to do the work, but the results are always in God's hands. That is that, having but not possessing, acting but not expecting, that chapter 2 discusses. Chapter 3. If you overesteem great men, people become powerless. If you overvalue possessions, people begin to steal. The master leads by emptying people's minds and filling their cores, by weakening their ambition and toughening their resolve. He helps people lose everything they know, everything they desire, and creates confusion in those who think they know. Practice not doing, and everything will fall into place. Not doing is hyphenated here. The Chinese word is wu wei. Practice wu wei, which is a kind of natural, spontaneous action. Action in accord with current conditions. Emptying people's minds and filling their cores. Maybe in a very simple way, we could just simply say getting out of your head and getting back into your heart, in your core, right? And weakening our craving or ambition and strengthening our resolve. Here's chapter 4, very, very brief chapter. The Tao is like a well, used but never used up. It is like the eternal void, filled with infinite possibilities. It is hidden but always present. I don't know who gave birth to it. It is older than God. So in chapter after chapter, Lao Tzu keeps sort of pointing at Tao, suggesting with these poetic aphorisms, well, it's kind of like this, it's kind of like that. Analogy after analogy. It's like a well, etc. I think Chinese philosophy is often, at least in this case, very adept at the methodology of metaphor. You know, Aristotle or Plato or Descartes wouldn't write a book like this. Neither would Marx or Locke or Hume or any other Western philosopher. This is philosophy by metaphor, philosophy by analogy. It suggests more than it proclaims and declares. And in the fertile invitation of these aphorisms, we are drawn into deeper and deeper reflections. And suddenly, our own realization of Tao begins to sharpen, come into focus. Here's chapter 5. The Tao doesn't take sides. It gives birth to both good and evil. The master doesn't take sides. She welcomes both saints and sinners. The Tao is like a bellows. It is empty yet infinitely capable. The more you use it, the more it produces. The more you talk of it, the less you understand. Hold on to the center. Another beautiful set of images about how it's essentially empty, and yet like a bellows, that is precisely its power, that it can make a fire raise its temperature because it has so much emptiness in it. Powerful. By the way, you hear Stephen Mitchell bouncing back and forth between he and she. That's because the language in the original archaic or ancient Chinese is gender neutral or gender non-specific. He's not being politically correct. He's being true to the intention of the original language. And Stephen Mitchell, I think, rightly questions nearly all of the other English translations, which uniformly use male pronouns. But he decided to throw that out, and I think he's right to do that. Why on earth would this only apply to people gendered one way and not in other ways? Right? Chapter 6, a very short one. The Tao is called the Great Mother. Empty yet inexhaustible, it gives birth to infinite worlds. It is always present within you. You can use it any way you want. What a nice contrast, you know, in the famous prayer Jesus gives us in the Gospel of Matthew, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, and so on. The Lord's Prayer. You know, God the Father. Here, ultimate reality is likened to a mother. And think of how a mother creates, you know, not when a woman is in her gestation period, after fertilization, the baby is simply growing inside her, the embryo, the baby. She doesn't have to get up in the morning and intentionally grow her baby's ear. You know, she's involved in a process that is happening to her, with her, through her, by her, for her, in her, around her. It is Tao doing the work. And that's how Tao poured forth all of this, not in an intentional act of creation, like Genesis tells us about God, but rather it poured out of Tao as if Tao were an inexhaustible spring. Not from intentionality, but simply because that is its nature, to pour itself forth. A lot of common ground here between Tao and Brahman in the Vedanta or Hindu systems, yeah? Brahman is the name in Sanskrit for the ground of being, the source even of the gods, right? The one of the Rig Veda, which poured itself forth into all of this. Chapter 7. The Tao is infinite, eternal. Why is it eternal? It was never born. Thus it can never die. Why is it infinite? It has no desires for itself. Thus it is present for all beings. The master stays behind. This is why she is ahead. She is detached from all things. This is why she is one with them. Because she has let go of herself, she is perfectly fulfilled. This is the great mystical teaching of all the spiritual traditions, isn't it? That only when you come out of craving, clinging, attachment, and fear, only when you let go of everything, do you then receive everything. It's the great paradox. You only get to keep what you give away. Chapter 8. The supreme good is like water, which nourishes all things without trying to. It is content with the low places that people disdain. Thus it is like the Tao. In dwelling, live close to the ground. In thinking, keep to the simple. In conflict, be fair and generous. In governing, don't try to control. In work, do what you enjoy. In family life, be completely present. When you are content to simply be yourself and don't compare or compete, everybody will respect you. Chapter 8, there's some good life advice there. I've seen that one on posters. And the first time in the Dao De Jing that Lao Tzu compares the Tao to water. And water is, of course, one of the many images that Lao Tzu uses to talk about the Tao. It keeps to the low places. It takes on the shape of whatever's holding it. It doesn't have a will. It doesn't try to do anything, and yet it gets everything done just by following its own nature, by following the Tao. Chapter 9. Fill your bowl to the brim, and it will spill. Keep sharpening the knife, and it will blunt. Chase after money and security, and your heart will never unclench. Care about people's approval, and you will be their prisoner. Do your work, then step back. The only path to serenity. 3 pairs of contrast. Fill your bowl to the brim, it'll spill. Sharpen the knife too much, it'll blunt. Chase after money and security, you won't have any security. You'll be terrified all the time. And then that 4th one, if you go chasing around for people's approval, you lose all your freedom. You're their prisoner. So those fascinating contrasts of going too far in one direction and ending up in the other. You need some money to be secure if you want food and a place to live. But if all you care about is money, you come right around and all the way back to that terrible feeling of you might as well not have a place. You're so miserable all the time. That's the circle of the yin and yang. Go too far in one direction, you end up in the other. A dull knife is bad, so we sharpen it. Sharp knife, good. But if you sharpen it too much, the first time it touches the cutting board, it dulls off, and you're right back to having a dull knife. So what are these images pointing to? Moderation. Via media in Latin, the middle path for the Buddha. This idea of nothing too much from Aristotle. That excellence is a middle point between the extreme of excess and the extreme of deficit. That middle point is the excellent point. That's where the knife is sharp. Chapter 10. Let's do a couple more here. Then we'll wrap up in this part 1 video. Chapter 10. Can you coax your mind from its wandering and keep to the original oneness? Can you let your body become supple as a newborn child's? Can you cleanse your inner vision until you see nothing but the light? Can you love people and lead them without imposing your will? Can you deal with the most vital matters by letting events take their course? Can you step back from your own mind and thus understand all things? Giving birth and nourishing, having without possessing, acting with no expectations, leading and not trying to control, this is the supreme virtue. So look at how Lao Tzu very quickly in these first 10 chapters has brought Tao down out of the cloud of metaphysical abstraction and put it right in you and the way you do your work and how you lead people at work, or how you lead your family, or how you are a citizen in the society in which you live, how you govern your own conflicting impulses. Finally, chapter 11 here. We join spokes together in a wheel, but it is the center whole that makes the wagon move. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. Work with being, but non-being is what we use. Yeah, what's the most important part of this glass? You know, the glass? That's pretty important. Otherwise, I would just have a puddle on the floor. But the emptiness between the walls of the glass, that's pretty important too, because that's the part I use to hold water. The outer hardness is the yang. The inner emptiness is the yin. You can never get yin and yang apart from each other because they're not opposites really. They are polarities of a singularity. Yin and yang are two sides of one thing. And Lao Tzu is continually drawing us to consider finding the Tao right in front of us and everything, and just at the end of our fingers. And that it is all around us. It is profoundly and deeply within us. And that wisdom then in Daoism is learning how to navigate through the yin and yang, high tide and low tide, that all forms undulate through, oscillate through, and we oscillate through them as well. And like a sailboat crossing a lake, going this way and that way and moving through the Tao, or the path that moves through them. One of the meanings of the word Tao is path or way. So let's wrap up episode 1 of our Dao De Jing series here with chapter 11. See you in episode 2 where we'll jump over a few and pick up with chapter 15 and keep going. So I'll see you soon on the other side.